Dream big, never stop dreaming, because you can do whatever that you want as long as you believe in your dreams.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dare to Dream Productions podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Johnson, and please welcome David Bradburn. He's a local independent filmmaker from Chicago and serves as the lead producer of the Von Steuben High School Film Festival. His award-winning films that focus on family, trauma, and social problems have played internationally and domestically in over 80 festivals. Hi, David.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good. Yourself?
Pretty good. So how did you get involved in Chicago's film scene?
I kind of through the film festival, which is actually now through the Von Steuben Film Festival, which is actually now the Funk. But I was making movies sort of on my own and kind of stepped away from that, and had a couple of careers, and ended up at a school that had a film festival. And through that is right when everything was starting to become on the consumer level. So digital editing was coming into existence, and just made it just sort of democratized filmmaking. And so through that, I was able to learn editing and the technology of it. And then from there, decided I wanted to get more and more involved in film. And then just over time, doing small projects, working my way up to bigger projects, my network just started to grow. And then from that, it just is where we are today.
Very cool. So with the production sound stages at Cinespace and now Monkey Paw filming Candyman in Chicago's becoming like a very hot spot for filmmakers. Where do you see it in, say, 10 years? And how can local Chicago filmmakers make an impact?
That's, I think where I see it in 10 years is largely dependent upon the state of Illinois and the tax breaks that they offer. Currently, they offer 30% tax incentive, and that brings a lot of productions in from outside. So that is really what's driving sort of the network and the feature production. In terms of what Chicagoans can do is just start to get involved. Start local stuff, small stuff, get to know people, and eventually, we're not that far removed. It's still a fairly small community here in Chicago, so no one is very far removed from anything big that's going on. It's just a matter of working your way into that.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a lot of smaller production companies that not a lot of people know about in Chicago. Do you have any you would recommend for like student filmmakers to get involved?
I mean, I recommend my own, Fork Demand Productions. But no, there's no shortage of production companies in Chicago. If you're a student filmmaker, assuming that you're not working with a university, just start reaching out to people. Just do your due diligence of searching and communicate, and then you'll see who's a good fit and what fits within your budget. Some companies, they're not going to work below a certain bottom line. Other companies are a little more flexible, and during this time, it's a whole new ballgame because we don't know what's going to happen next. Where the money's going to start to flow, when production is really going to pick up. There's a few things starting to film, but it's really not back in full swing yet. And a lot of stuff that is starting to film is working with really, really, really skeleton crews. So the work is starting to come back, but it certainly is not back yet.
So let's talk about being an independent filmmaker and getting your film off the ground. We have a question from Puerto Rico, and Marco asks, how do you find a producer and financiers?
So, to be honest, most of my own creative work, I've self-financed. It really was just a matter of setting my budget for the year so that I had money to make movies. And when I was teaching and working as a freelancer, I lived off my teaching money and created off my freelance money. So looking for financing is always the trick, right? And I wish I had a great answer that we all could find the money easily. No two projects are funded the same, so it's really just looking for what ways the project you're working on can get money. I'm working on a project now, and we're looking to partner with an organization that deals with the topic that the film is about, and we're trying to set them up as our fiscal sponsor. So people would donate to that entity, and then that entity would grant us money back to make the movie. And then the people that are donating would have a tax write-off. sort of similar to like Seed and Spark, but we're going through the actual entity that deals with the social topic we're dealing with, as opposed to going through a third party that just deals with financing. But crowdfunding is difficult. It requires a pretty expansive network, and for things that kind of build momentum quickly. If you're lucky enough to know somebody who's connected to more money, then that's a different route to go. But there's no one simple answer, and none of the answers are simple.
I definitely like how I never really thought about like reaching out to organizations that are similar to like the topic that you're filming about. That's a good idea, especially for like independent filmmakers.
Yeah, it's something we're trying different for this project, so we'll see how it goes. It's taken us a lot longer to get ready to start raising money, but hopefully in the end it'll pay off, because once we finish the film, we'll already have an entity in place that we can partner with for screenings that will help raise awareness for the social issues we're talking about.
Cool. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is it a feature, a short?
It's a short, and it's a dark comedy about testicular cancer, which we find really funny, and the title is My Best Nut. And so we're looking to raise awareness and normalize conversations around testicular cancer, which is a really, if it's caught early enough, is a highly treatable disease, but it's often not, and there's a lot of stigma around talking about it. Whereas like breast cancer has really just become part of, ubiquitous in our society and conversations. Testicular cancer, not so much.
That's very true. So coming from your background in film festivals, do you think submitting cover letters to a film festival is important or just a waste of time?
The honest answer is I don't know. I've had success with festivals I submitted cover letters and success with ones I didn't. What I found with festivals is the more you network within that community, then the easier it is to get accepted. So it's not just having a good product. That's certainly the first thing, is have a good film. But if you start to know people, then it helps, because you're a known entity. And they're getting thousands of submissions, and they have to figure out which films to show. And if you get in, try to get to the festival, because then you meet people, and then that social capital starts to grow.
Definitely. I miss film festivals right now because of all this COVID. Like, I was supposed to be playing at the Milwaukee International Film Festival. That's not happening. And like just a few ones, like DePaul, I go to school at DePaul, and there was like this big film festival at the Music Box in the spring. That didn't happen. So hopefully 2021 film festivals will start to come back.
It's hard. Like I was supposed to play at a film festival in Chicago this summer, and they've pushed it all the way to next year. And so they're going to do a 2-week festival. The first week will be the 2020 festival, and the second week will be the 2021 festival.
Oh, wow.
So it's an interesting solution, but it doesn't do anything for us right now. And then in terms of thinking about production, I was stressed that I wasn't working on anything, but now it's like, even if I had, where does it get shown? Because everything is going online, nothing's happening in person. So it's kind of an interesting time to see how festivals are going to pivot and adjust to this new situation. Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of virtual festivals, but I don't know if it's something like I really want to do. Like, I'm more about the screenwriting conferences online. Like, those are cool. Like, taking advantage of like the virtual free like podcasts with other filmmakers and stuff like that. But the film festivals online, I'm not sure. Like, it's still a good way to connect and like see what's being shown out there, but I don't know, it's just not really for me.
It's hard because I think the Q&A and the actual interacting is really important in the festival scene, and we have a ton of online content that we're consuming all day long, and so adding a film festival on top of it where you're probably watching with yourself or a couple of people just doesn't have the same energy and intrigue that it does in person. So you're right, it's a difficult sell. And then the festival's trying to make money. They're going to charge you a little bit to get behind their firewall, which makes sense. But we've already got Netflix and Amazon Prime, so we can get content that way and save our money, because a lot of us aren't making a lot of money right now. And so we need to be aware of that too. So it's a difficult thing.
Exactly. It was kind of shocking to find out they were charging for like virtual film festivals too. Just to like, there's this one called Flick Fair. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mm-mm.
It's like a virtual film festival, and one of my films got accepted, but then they wanted me to pay actual money to get it shown online. And I thought that was a little like, something's not right here.
Yeah, I had one that I got into that wanted everybody to pay to be able to watch the movie. So as a filmmaker whose film was screening, I still had to pay if I wanted to watch the films from their festival. And I'm like, I'm part of what makes your festival happen. You're showing my content, and now I'm supposed to pay to see other people's content, and that doesn't feel great. And I get it on their end. They're not able to open a venue and make money that way, but I don't know if your content providers are the ones that you should be charging.
And it's kind of just seems like a scam. Like, it's kind of like paying just, yeah, like you're already spent so much money to make this product, to make this film, and why should you be spending money to show it? Like, when you don't know, like, who's gonna actually come and everything. So
Right.
are there like any other like scams or just like festivals when you're looking on like Film Freeway, like things to be aware of, like which ones you should not submit to?
Do some research. Look at their social media. See what's out there. Look at sort of how they're set up. Look at the number of years they've had run. You can look at reviews, but they're only going to tell you so much. So if they've got bad reviews, pay attention to that. Good reviews, you kind of have to read with a grain of salt and kind of figure out who, just kind of parse the words. So it's a challenge, and I'll be honest, I spent a lot of money when I first started out submitting to film festivals, many of which I didn't get in, and later, I got into some and realized it wasn't worth the submission fee. So it can be a scam. And there's a lot of great festivals out there at the same time. So it's just kind of learning, and if as your network grows, you have more people to ask about specific festivals. Like, hey, I saw this festival, do you know anything about it? Or I saw that your film had gotten in there, what can you tell me about it? And then, having those conversations offline is probably where you're going to get better information.
That's really good advice. So if you are going to submit a cover letter, how do you make yourself stand out?
I would say I'm not the world's greatest cover letter writer, and that goes back to like looking for a regular job as well. I think what you want to do is if there's anything unique about your project, location, actors, topic, anything that can kind of makes your film slightly different than every other film that's telling the same story, because, let's be honest, at this point in human history, we're not really telling new stories. We're just telling our version of old stories. So anything that makes yours a little bit different, put that in there. I have submitted to the festival in my hometown, and I've always put in like, hey, I'm a product of this environment, and I've always put a cover letter. I've never gotten in. So, I don't. I'm sure it just doesn't fit into their festival. It's not a knock on that festival. It's just like that uniqueness didn't make me unique enough for them to accept me. So it's really hard to. It's really a crapshoot. But again, the more you kind of know about a festival and festivals, then you can target it a little bit better. But it's hard. It's hard.
It is, for sure. So you are a freelance director. So I'm sorry if I'm going to butcher this first name. Jalila from Houston asks, how do you know you are right for your project or for the project?
It depends on how you're deciding what you want to do. Sometimes it really is just as practical as, hey, this is a paying gig and I need to get paid. And like there's nothing immoral about the topic. It's just, maybe not my, fiery passion, but it's still an okay project to do. It's certainly like corporate stuff that can be, less creative, but it can pay really well. So, considering that, when it comes down to other projects, there's times I've done stuff that looking back, I was like, it really didn't, like there was nothing wrong with it, but it wasn't great. It just wasn't either a great experience or the topic was just something that I was mildly interested in, but it was work. So when you have the problem of plenty and you have to pick between things, then you can really, roll up your sleeves and say, hey, This is far more interesting and far more what I want to focus on. So I'm going to go in this direction. But really just, set your standards and stick to them, because it's okay to say no and to get past like, hey, nothing's ever going to come again. Don't make that the driving reason to take a project. Just give yourself that freedom.
As a follow-up question, how do you politely decline a project if you don't think you are the right fit or not a fan of the concept?
You can just say, I don't think I'm the best person for this project. There's nothing wrong with saying that. I've been turned down by people saying they've got family obligations or they're booked on something else. That happens. What I assume that that was the truth, but it doesn't matter. It was a polite way to say no. You don't need to go into every last detail. If there's something really concerning, something really specific, you can call that out. It also depends on your level of connection with whoever is doing the hiring. If you know them really well, you can have a really frank conversation. If it's, someone that you don't know as well, just say, I don't think this is the project for me, and just keep moving on.
Your film Seven focuses on the culture of violence in African American relationships and was written by, I'm not sure if I'm also going to pronounce this name right, Kia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kia? Who was a domestic violence survivor. Being a male director when the film is about two female domestic violence survivors, how important was it to work with her and get her perspective before directing?
It was very important. I have a background in social work, so this wasn't, the first time I've talked with someone in a domestic violence situation. But understanding as best as I could, the perspective of the point of view of the characters is helpful, to understand like, hey, these are the things that the character would be dealing with, and how do we get that to come out on the screen. So yeah, was it more important in domestic violence than other stuff? I think it's always important to really have conversations with your actors. Those conversations become increasingly important when it's something outside of your experience. Clearly, I've never been a woman of color, and so that was something I had to have more conversations about.
According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center's website, nearly 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men in the U.S. have been raped at some time in their lives. It's heartbreaking. Talking about sexual harassment is becoming less of a taboo subject with movements such as the Me Too movement, but I feel like as a filmmaker, there's still no training on how to handle situations like this. Vince from Seattle wants to know, how do you handle sexual harassment on set?
I think that really comes down to your hiring practices. Know who you're hiring, and so then it doesn't become an issue. So don't let it get to the point that it's coming on set, because once it's on set, then you address it directly. You deal with it swiftly. But if you are hiring people that either or they know people that you vet them, you interview them, do your due diligence as someone who's basically an employer, then you limit the chances of that happening. But it's an issue, clearly.
What about sexism on set? Because being a female, sometimes I've definitely had some sexist crew members, and it's kind of a hard conversation to have.
Yeah, it detracts from what's supposed to be happening, and it being on a film set, the work is difficult under the best circumstances, and then you add that to it. Again, it's addressing it. It's addressing it directly. It's not just being wishing that didn't happen. It's saying no, it don't happen. If it's someone from the grip department, it's having the producer and the DP address it. It's there are chains of command, and if it happens to an actor, that's a different level of problem, because you're trying to pull a performance out of that person, and now you've tainted that space, and so that has to be addressed. So again, a lot of it goes back to kind of cultivating who your people are and who your tribe is that you have on set. And the reality is too that
the reputation spread pretty quickly. And that is even more impactful in the indie world. You know, it's not an A-list actor who's going to, you know, command a lot of money and studios are very invested in them. If it's, you know, you're just trying to make a living and you start getting a reputation of, hey, you're a problem on set, people aren't going to have you on set.
Mm-hmm. Which they shouldn't, because that's definitely a major problem.
Yes, 100%.
As a director, I believe it's very important to make sure everyone feels comfortable to be themselves without being judged on set. Troy from the United Kingdom asks, how do producers and directors ensure that their work environment is a friendly and collaborative environment?
Again, you know, I keep sounding like a broken record, but it goes back to who you're hiring. Make sure you hire people that are going to gel together as a team. And then it's establishing how you behave on set. People are going to look, stuff's going to come from the top down. You know, have a producer that can manage the climate. Have your department heads that are going to work well with those that are assisting them. I think, you know, the more that you can be relaxed in that intense environment, the better. Prep helps. You know, there's no substitute for good pre-pro, and that will help mitigate stress on set. And the less stressful the set is, the less likely people are going to be acting out of their stressed self, and then, you know, just things get more tense. But again, hire well.
That's good advice. Is there like anything you do in the beginning, like before sets, like before you start shooting, to like amp up your crew members or just to get the mood like up?
I rely a lot on the crew, you know, the camera department, the GE people, they've largely fall under the DP. And so that's the DP's job to kind of set the tone for them. And, you know, sometimes you play music, sometimes you don't. It just kind of depends on the location, what the scene is, what the mood of the day is. And then I focus more on like the art department, the actors, that side of things. And just go in, and a lot of it's just going and talking and checking in with people and see how they are and kind of set the tone of, hey, we're all in this together. That helps. But a lot of it really just, like, you know, if you're filming a really difficult scene, you're not going to put on, you know, some dance song and have everybody be up and pumping, because you also have to be sensitive to the fact that these actors have to get into a certain space and perform. And you want to really be sensitive to what their needs are as well. So there's no one simple answer, because there's so many variables, and it's just looking at those variables and figuring out what the best solution is.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important what you said about like making sure everyone feels valued on set, and like actually knowing names is important too.
Yeah, I agree. And it gets, the bigger the set, the more difficult that is. Because as a director, like, I have a lot of responsibility, and I can't always talk to everybody or interact or know every name, but somebody needs to do that so everyone knows that they're included, because, you know, we're all finite in what we are able to bring, and not taxing ourselves too much. It's same with the actors. Like, they don't need to go around and converse with everybody. They need to be in the space they can be to perform.
Yeah, and definitely get into like the role more.
Yeah.
For them. So if you have to fire someone, how do you fire them politely and respectfully? And this question is from Roger from the United Kingdom.
So fortunately, it hasn't happened a lot. And I can't think of a time that we've ever had to ask somebody to leave set. There's been times that we've not asked them to come back, where we just said, hey, we're you know, at the end of the day, you're wrapped on the project, and you just replace that position. More common is the list of people that you don't want to work with again. And if they're showing up late, not doing good work, slowing down production, then they're going to go on a list of do not hires. And so a lot of the firing is passive, in that I'm just not bringing you back. But when it's, like I said, fortunately, I've never had to be in a situation where we had to send somebody home that day. There's been times that there was some overbooking, And so we had to send people, but they still got a day's pay. We weren't able to give them actual physical work. So, that wasn't great either, but it wasn't as hard of feelings because they still got paid.
Well, that's good then. It's like,
Yeah.
you didn't have to do that. Because it's definitely difficult. Like, I had this one producer and it's hard when you're not paying people either, when you first start off and someone is just like not putting in the effort, not showing up on time. And it's a hard thing to like politely say that. Like, I had to write an email because I just like felt so bad like saying it to his face, but he obviously like knew what he was doing too. So like, yeah, it's a little difficult, but so let's admit it, being on set can be really stressful and many different people ask you a million questions. Jalila from Houston asks, as a director, what is something you don't want to forget while on set?
What I'm doing. Gosh, I'm not sure how to answer that question off the top of my head. There's so much to remember as a director, right? And so what's nice is when you have, like a script supervisor and an assistant director, and not all productions are big enough to have that, where you have someone who's helping you remember certain things. And so those people can remind you, or some sort of assistant where you can just say, hey, don't let me forget this. I think having really good notes going into set of what you're doing, how you're going to approach it, having those conversations with your DP so that you're on the same page, but all that takes place before. So when you're in the moment, you're like, okay, this is what we're trying to do. We already had that established. Now here's the variables we didn't anticipate. So how do we change what we were trying to do? I think one thing that I've forgotten is, like, I've wanted certain shots, I've had them on the list, and somehow we forgot it. That kind of stuff happens. But making sure that you've got enough coverage to cut the piece together when you're done is important. So I don't know if that totally answers the question, but
Oh, that was a good response.
There is a lot for the director to do, and if you're on set and the director seems to be preoccupied with something else, they're probably preoccupied with a dozen other things. Don't take it personally.
Mm-hmm. I definitely feel that though. Like, you're so in the moment. Sometimes like the shot you really wanted, but you like wrote it down, but you're so in the moment, you always forget it. And it's like, oh man. But yeah, having an assistant director, I think, is beautiful. It's a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
As a follow-up question, how do you deal with pressure and expectations put onto you? And this question is from Val from Vancouver.
It depends on where those expectations are coming from. So, if it's my personal project, I wrote it, I'm financing, I'm producing and directing it, then I'm pretty good at establishing my expectations. I'm a proponent of the phrase that filmmaking is an exercise in disappointment. You have this vision, and then you have what you can make, and those are not the same thing. And just like get comfortable with that, and always strive for the vision, but realize that there's a gazillion variables that are beyond your control. When the expectations coming from like a client or an agency, that becomes different. And a lot of that is communicate as much as you can going in, and try to really listen to what they're not understanding. So when you get done with production, you get into the edit, people aren't surprised in coming back to you with whatever they come back to you with. And that can be frustrating and disappointing. But I think just communication is key, and really just give yourself some grace. Like, you're not saving lives, you're making a movie, and you're working with a bunch of people in an imperfect environment. And it's, nothing is going to be exactly how you hope it to be.
It is sometimes disappointing, but just to like remember to also have fun, let go, and like don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you're gonna learn like one day. Like, even if it's not a great movie at the end of the day, you still learn so much being on set.
Right. People ask me all the time, like, what's your favorite of your movies? And I'm like, I can't pick one because they're all important in different ways. I can look at the one where I learned how to do this, or I learned not to do that, or I can look at the one that all of a sudden got more public exposure. But that public exposure came because I learned all these other lessons on other ones. So like, to have one favorite one for me is like, I don't. and the having fun piece, you know, sometimes it's work and it feels like work, and other times it's a blast. But it's the whole process. It's every piece along the way to kind of look at that collectively. Was that fun?
How has the pandemic affected your work or creative process?
I mean, it's decimated work, right? It's completely took it away. So, I mean, that's changed things drastically. In that, it's made the creative process, it's made it difficult because, like, if I can write now because all it takes is a computer, but there's kind of a dearth of hope at this moment of being like, hey, I know I can make this. Where in the past, I could be writing like, I know I can put this together because I know we can do X, Y, and Z. I don't know what we can do. You know what? With My Best Nut, we've got some scenes where it's children in a hospital and the main characters reading them stories and stuff. And it's a really great scene. It says a lot about the character. I don't know if we can film it because just having a bunch of extras there, you know, I don't know how do we figure out how to tell that part of the character's story in a different way. And so that's made the creative process challenging. And just, you know, not knowing when work's coming is like, well, why do I write today? Because I can write tomorrow or I can write the next day. There's no urgency because everything is just a big question mark.
I definitely agree. And just like, I feel like there's a lot of fatigue in this moment too. Like you're exhausted just because it's like, when is this going to be over with? When can I actually do that project that's been sitting there for like months now? And it's like, we still don't know.
Yeah, not knowing is so draining.
Yeah. What about like your mental health? Like, has it definitely changed?
Yeah, I mean, I the way I've talked about it is I spend a lot of energy staying positive. And when I'm spending energy staying positive, I don't have energy left over to progress. And so like, hey, I stay hopeful, but I don't have a lot to advance stuff some days. So it's been a drain. You know, when this first hit, like, it's like, all right, so we're gonna, you know, we got a month, we can, you know, do this. And I'm fairly introverted. So I'm like, all right, whatever, I can stay home alone and stay motivated. And I don't sit around watching Netflix all day. I try to stay active, but as it's kind of drug on, like it's becoming more and more of a challenge to get up and feel like, hey, what I'm going to do today actually matters. Because it's gotten hard and there's no textbook. There's no like, hey, how have people gotten through this in the past? Because we've not been here before.
Has there anything that has made you stay motivated or just give you the light at the end of the tunnel?
I mean, just kind of digging in and saying like, okay, I still find enjoyment in doing this. I was just talking today with a DP with an idea that I had, not so much of a story, but just how to approach doing something during this time. And that conversation is exciting because there's a sense of possibility. Whether or not we'll try to pull it off, and if we try, will we? That remains to be seen. We just started the conversation today, but having, you know, staying in touch with people that are in the same situation, that are trying to do the same things is encouraging, because it doesn't feel like, hey, I'm going to go contact somebody who is working all the time and has got all this stuff going on, and I'm just like, hey, what about me? Remember me? So, kind of that we're all in the same boat helps.
Definitely. So what's next for you, David?
I mean, honestly, I don't know. I really don't know. I spend a fair amount of time looking for work for whatever's coming next. And like I said, I've got a film that we hope to start raising funds towards the end of the year and that we can shoot next spring. And then, I honestly, I don't know what's coming next. I think that's part of what's draining is, for the first time in my life, whatever we plan, there's less guarantees. There's never any guarantees, but like I knew growing up, like if I go to college, I can get a job afterwards. And if I start sending out enough resumes, pretty soon I'm going to start getting interviews. If I get enough interviews, I'm going to get an offer. That's a little less the case when there's so many people just trying to, sustain themselves. Because we are very much in survival mode versus thriving mode.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We're trying to just adapt to this new normal is all we could do.
Right.
Interesting. Like there are a lot of like films being done virtually, like through Zoom and stuff like that. So that opens up a new kind of world of possibilities too, which is exciting.
Right. So, and it's finding the story. Like I've always struggled with having the, two people in a coffee shop story. Okay, I can shoot this feature. I need one location and shoot. Like I've never had the story that fits that. And I've certainly written with some pretty tight parameters, like these are very finite resources, let's do that. But the more I write, the more I want the stories to become not huge. I'm not trying to make a blockbuster, but just have like space in them. And now we're going back to like, how do we do the small stuff? Or how do I, what's the story I tell where a bunch of people are on Zoom? And there's been some stuff that's come out, and some of it's actually pretty good. I just haven't found what my plot is to try to make through that vehicle.
Yeah, it's definitely hard, but who knows? You might find it within the next.
Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, don't give up. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
You can find David's website in the description below. Bye.